Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. This is Design CHARCHA, Sadea's Design CHARCHA, and I'm Archana Shekhara. I teach graphic design at Illinois State University, and joining me are these wonderful folks and all women today. So thank you so much for joining. And we have Garima, who's also a part of Sadea, and then we have our guest, Gaby, and Allison, Satare, Katie, and Mina. Thank you so much for joining us this morning or afternoon for you all. So I just want to say a little bit about Design CHARCHA. Design CHARCHA is a biannual conversation series hosted by SADEA, that's South Asian Design Educators Alliance, in the months of January and August. And I'm just letting one more person join us, sorry. CHARCHA translates as discussion, argument, debate, a juicy rumor, or a discourse in few South Asian languages. In this discussion series, Sadea invites people beyond the South Asian diaspora as an attempt to bridge the gap between transcontinental perspective and research. Design CHARCHA manifests in the form of open conversations, presentations, collaborations, or dialogues. Treating design as an open sky, Sadea invites professionals from diverse disciplines, designers, filmmakers, artists, educators, animators, and cultural and creative workers from around the globe to share a similar sky. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And I'm going to ask my fellow member, Garima, to introduce our amazing guest, Gaby. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Garima. I'm so excited to introduce Gaby. Gaby and I went to grad school together, actually. And, she comes with they come with a lot of accolades. So I'll start. Gaby Hernandez is a Costa Rican designer, associate professor, endowed chair of graphic design, and interim assistant director of the University of Arkansas School of Art. She's the founder of Story and Material, a bilingual design research and making initiative that investigates the connection between identity, visual storytelling, memory, and materiality. She experiments with texture, image, type, visual juxtapositions, and narratives focusing on cultural identity and heritage. This is applied in her teaching through the development of visual storytelling methods that help individuals unearth their unique visual languages to demonstrate how decoloniality in design starts with making space for one's own expression. Gaby's professional and scholarly work on multidisciplinary, decolonial, anti-racist, equitable, and inclusive design has taken place in multiple countries and has been disseminated nationally and internationally on journals and at professional conferences since 2010. I'll leave to you, Gaby.
Thank you, Garima. And yes, it's a very happy moment for me to see so many marvelous women who have had some kind of good impact in my life in the last 15 years. So yeah, it's a very happy moment. And I'm very humble to be invited to join you. I think that when it comes to multinational or international people of color, we are all always trying to find our space, and particularly women. I think it's a very beautiful thing to know that we tend to stick to each other and keep close connections with people to heal and to be better and feel better throughout our life. So this is an honor, really. So I think I can share my screen, right, Archana?
Yes, you should be able to, Gaby.
Okay, share screen. There we go. So I'm gonna share a little bit of work, but mostly my interest is about just talking how we come about realizing our space in the world, how we understand and deal with different kinds of situations, different kinds of feelings that many people don't really experience in the same way. So my aim is to just start talking a little bit about that and how that translates into the work. So I call this presentation as like the Design Voices, Healing the Immigrant Heart. And I want to start by telling you, Garima mentioned it before, I am from Costa Rica. I moved to the United States in 2007. And I don't really know many designers in academia here in the United States from Costa Rica. So it has been somewhat an isolated situation that I've discovered through the years. But I have been able to find many people with heritage or from countries close to Costa Rica, so Central America, Mexico, South America. So that has also been a good thing to go through life and discover others. So I think that it's worth mentioning something that Kelly Walters said one time, that we all have different backgrounds that inform how we move through the world. So I want to start with this just because it's important to see ourselves and not compare ourselves to what others are or what others represent, but embrace that kind of uniqueness and that background that defined us everywhere we go. And this is because in my case, as a woman of color from Costa Rica, who grew up in a urban space, in a low income family, for me, there was a lot of people before me who made things a little bit better for myself and for others like me. And I always try to be very conscious about acknowledging those. And this includes mentors, professors, dear friends, friendships that have lasted 20 years, 25 years. And also my mother. So this is a collage that I created actually, I had the opportunity to include a case study in Alison Place's book. And this is one of the pieces that I provided. And this is a collage that I created actually around the idea of how we are able to identify elements in our life that could be inspiring to others and the people that we have that are closer to us, right? In this case, our children, our nephews, nieces, brothers, sisters. So the person right behind my baby picture is my mother, and the rest of the people in the back is my aunts, uncles, my grandmother. And my mother was always the rebel of the family. She used to be very straightforward with her opinions, what people would say opinionated, and I saw all of that. And I was also aware that she made every single effort to give me the chance, even given the situation that we lived in, the chance to learn and experience. And she was very supportive of my artistic interests as well, which is something that I appreciate very much. So what does it mean to immigrate? I started to talk about people this week, about what this means, people who have immigrated to the United States as well. And I noticed that there is a whole lot of people talking about, sad things, separation, nostalgia, emptiness. We go through all of these feelings at some point, right? That sense of solitude, having to readapt or relearn or learn a new language, how much disruption this causes in our own identity, on how we need to just learn to be in a completely new place, right? But I also noticed, and I share a lot of this, that immigration also brings a sense of adventure and a sense of newness that I usually appreciate starting new things very much. So I think that immigration is a constant restarting of things. There are many stressful joys, things that are actually positive, but going through them create a lot of stress. But one thing that I wanted to focus on is the idea of improvement. So through many conversations that I've had with others, the word improvement is something that I feel we is far from being just one thing, right? It's something that we can interpret in so many ways, especially for the immigrants. We're thinking about what is improvement? Well, I want a solid income or security or safety, like physical safety, right? People immigrate for those reasons all the time. Thinking about being recognized or, a better future, having access to services and all those kinds of things. And I think that that is closely related to the idea of progress as well, right? So I think that that's something that we all share in that case. But the most important part for me is how immigrants, regardless, we're able to find one way or the other, find our space or find a space. And it doesn't have to be just one place. It can be many spaces in many different locations or with people. But we have this sense of resiliency, right? That many other immigrants or people with heritage that is multicultural can be able to identify. So I want to share the work of Alexandria Canchola, someone I admire enormously, and I admire her work greatly. And she has a whole series about the immigration experience as a second generation Latina woman in Texas. And you should check out her work if you haven't or if you don't know it, because it's very rich, it's very expressive, it's very real. She is able to present many little vignettes and things that make our everyday as immigrants in a very clear, colorful, iconographic way. So I really admire that work. All this to say that through this kind of hardship, right, immigrants are able to find that space. We also try, or at least in my case, have tried to gain a louder voice. That means becoming visible. And this is a perspective that I honestly don't know if other people from other cultures or areas have also noticed this, but Latin American immigrants are mostly people who have entered, let's say, the United States in a way to survive, right? And that means not being able to have the expected documentation or going through the expected processes, right? So there is an enormous amount of people from Latin American heritage that live in the shadows, right? People who go do the work and that's it. That's the only time that you see them. So since the beginning, even though my situation of immigration is completely different because it was through education, through the university, it pains me to see how invisible the much of the Latin America first generation immigrants in the United States are still invisible or have the sense of these, I'll stay in the shadows. Otherwise, the consequences can be really, really bad. So as a designer, we deal with many concepts and terminologies and moments in which we analyze, okay, so I am in the design field, what does it mean? What does it take? So thinking a lot about it and going through different stages in the profession, I see design as a practice that requires curiosity, criticality, that should be humanist, because we, or at least in the area of design that I move, we aim for positive impact. And we try to experience with the unknown, take chances. And at some point, I came to realize that we immigrants work in a very similar way. We are people who are able to be resilient through the unknown. We are people who take our chances, clearly, and it may go really well, it may not go so well, but we're able to go through it. And we have, I think, a greater sense of humanism, just because we see ourselves as a reflection of the world and what is good and what is bad. And we share a lot of pain with many other groups around the world that is very particular, very unique. And I think that, at least in my case, I am a very curious and critical person, and I that is a huge part of getting to know new places, being able to adapt to new places. So it takes a lot of that kind of curiosity. So one of the things that I've been thinking about in terms of my identity, how my immigrant identity and my profession can collide in some way, how could I identify strategies and traits, methods, you name it, that would help me heal as an immigrant with pain and situations that are unresolved and missing, that make me visible, that allow me to tell others about this while succeeding in the design profession, right? So I have done a lot of soul searching, and I think that the things that have helped me the most have been these 5 elements. My willingness to unlearn and experiment, going through the hardship of being truly vulnerable and be open to share whatever needs to be shared to make a point. Keeping in mind that I can make unique work, and that means not depending on the status quo or canons that people would expect to happen in design. And unique work makes it usually memorable. And the biggest thing is to focus on tell stories, right? Everybody can identify with a story, so we can all share and tell our stories, and in one way or the other, we're going to be able to find a common place. So one of the first things that I've been doing is embracing my life journey, right? That's a thing that I try to communicate every time I can. And that's a really good starting point for healing through design. So I love data, and I like to quantify and do things like that. So one of the things that I've been doing is, okay, so we are always thinking about what is a good life, right? Probably a life that is like more or less in the same sort of average pain level, living comfortably, like the idea that capitalism has given us as a good life is usually related to health and wealth, right? So, and then I started to think about that, this average, this idea of balance and living a quite harmonious life. I went through my own experiences, some of the most important, some of the most relevant throughout, let's say, in the last 25 years. And I've noticed that my life really is not in any way level, right? So I started to think about, okay, so how would I place this event, this situation, this breaking point in this idea of a level life. So I started to play around with these sort of metrics, if you name it like that. And what happens throughout is not only those metrics, but little situations that took me to other situations, so it's a much more complicated graphic, I think. So thinking about, how we go from this idea of having a level, balanced and harmonious life, and how we work towards that, and how things actually happen, right? So just trying to understand that, okay, this is a graphic that kind of shows my journey. Okay, that's fine, and understand why all those things happened. And then from that point, it has been really important for me to create. So sometimes creation looks very random, very abstract, very senseless. But I think that the fact that we are able to create, and this could be anything, right? This could be writing, this could be collaging, this could be bookmaking, any kind of method or technique that we prefer. I think that just knowing that we have had these experiences and trying to make sense of those experiences through expression is really a very good starting point for that kind of healing, right? So these are some of the works that I've done through the years, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years. In 2022, I did an experiment that I will be doing something visual based on these premises every day. So I ended up with more than 300 different little things made that would represent a memory or experience of something that will be like affecting me one day or the other. So I have tons of these visual experiments, right? This one, like a mosaic, in pieces, we reconstruct each other. So memories that are very, very specific, like the one in the left. Others that are more abstract, that kind of replicate thoughts during the day. So there is a lot of this kind of like instantaneous making, instantaneous reaction to different moments that have marked that journey, that life journey. And it was really helpful and has been really helpful because it helps me understand the reasons and the situations and the context, but also help me see it in a tactile way, and kind of like have a sense of closure with many of those things, right? So I have done a lot of that. These are, a mix of memory, situations, and events that are very easily to recognize in a journey like the one that I showed you before. Another thing that I have been doing is looking at life, my identity, my culture from a micro level. So it means looking into my everyday from the perspective of shapes, forms, colors, signs, iconography, even type. So this is a collection of images that I took. Garima made remember this from my thesis project at the University of Florida years ago, and I keep these images very close to my heart because without knowing it, I started to already see a lot of that kind of micro lens in my work to start emerging. So there is still to this day a lot of this kind of influence from the island I made my thesis project. I did my research there in my country, in Costa Rica, in a place that I had never been before. And, the ability to look back and see things from a different level, from a macro level, and how that influences even our languages, right? Our visual language. So things like this start to emerge, this kind of like very simple, very basic practice of repetition, reinterpretation, analysis, experimenting with very simple shapes and forms and colors. So I did things like this, that would define my everyday. I started to be more conscious about the places I will visit, but back at home when I was able to go, and appreciate in a deeper way the characters, the fauna, the plants, the colors, the patterns, the fabrics, all of those things that bring me back home and help me heal, but in a very iconographic way that I don't think I ever thought about before in the same form. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. So yeah, a lot of these iconographic micro discoveries started to show up with time in other more complex interpretations, and collage has definitely been one of the things that I have valued the most, and that I have found to be the most appropriate for my own healing through design. So there is a lot of that iconography that I've been collecting through the years that makes sense to my identity that I have started to put together. I want to bring attention to the risograph on the right, which is an experiment that I started to do after scanning the veil of my mother's wedding dress. So for me, those shapes and the quality of the embroidery and all of that has been a huge element in my visual language in the last 2 years. So, and the fact that I can experiment with it and I can revisit it and do new things with it is a huge and very motivating thing for me. So yeah, capturing little elements, what they mean, adding some writing. And then a third element, and it kind of encapsulates everything that I have been mentioning, is just the idea of revisiting memories and past experiences that I know I can acknowledge that they need to be revisited and they need to be brought back. We tend to hide things under the rug, particularly when there are, you know, things in our past that we may be running away from if we're immigrating to another country or trying to forget. And this also includes multi-generational trauma, right? This also includes things that maybe my parents went through or my grandparents went through that still influence my life and my identity. So more of this kind of work, right? Like thinking, analyzing, sketching around situations and moments and events in life, trying to identify what are some of the takeaways from that and how that can be visualized. There is also a lot of visual storytelling and visual essaying that I have done, which in many ways can be very complicated and messy, and trying to capture a lot of the events and happenings and turning points that I showed you before in my graphic, right? What other ways I can put the same kind of information in a visual, more engaging form that also allows me to add narrative, to just tell raw stories and show work and images and other elements that help tell the story. These experiments allow me to do more, to expand into micro experiments, right? Like I could take little parts of the stories and just focus on that. I could expand that and look beyond that perspective. So it's a very liberating practice of visiting and revisiting memories and events. So these are some, the one on the left is a section of a multi-page visual essay that I did recently. And it talks basically about how I am part of many people. So I can read it to you. I am texture, color, and spice. I am my grandmothers and aunts and their picadillos, which is one of the things that they cook really, really awesomely. Their little breads and cakes. I am Leighton, which is my mother's last name, and I carry it as a second last name. Through and through, as much as I am Hernandez, I am Guido and Juan Carlos. Guido is my grandfather. Juan Carlos is my dad. I am Maria Luisa and Margarita. Maria Luisa, my grandmother. Margarita, my mother. I am Hania and Eunice, Mauricio, and Jose Paulo. Hania is my godmother. Eunice is a very close aunt of mine from my dad's side, who is also very close to me. And Mauricio and Jose Paulo are my brothers. And so I imagine all of these, like this pile of pots, right, that start to kind of like be in balance in some way, even though they are like full of different things and different elements. So visual essaying, I recommend it to everybody. Do it. And continuing with collaging, that has also been a very powerful tool, as I said before. Some more fine artsy things that happened here and there. This is coming from the 2022 experiment that I told you about. This as well. So, going back to, there is a memory that I cannot forget ever, which was the time that I lost my very first gold chain when I was 6 years old, probably, that it fell and went through the cracks of a wood floor under my house. and I was never able to recuperate it. And to this day, that necklace, I hurt for it because I really, really loved it. And it was probably the first biggest value gift that I had received. So, things like that, that for some reason they stay there. And it made me realize some tendencies or some maybe activities that I like to do that always bring me back to specific moments, right? So being able to put it out there really helps making sense of all of that. The one on the left was a digital analog collage / narrative that I put together for an exhibition. And this one is particularly very powerful to me because it was during the middle of the pandemic. For me, it was very painful to see so many people dying, particularly older people, the elderly here in the United States. And it was painful because many of those persons were actually not like the age that we would think people should be dying, right? Like maybe a young mother or maybe a young dad. So my mother died at 50, and it always brought me back to these pain of seeing a young parent be to lose them in a situation like an illness or something that is in many ways preventable but inevitable at the same time, right? And other memories of like this one is about my childhood and what it meant for me to prepare to go to school when I was very, very young. And there is a lot of memory about the shapes of the tiles, the colors of the spaces, the floors. So being able to just put that out there. And this one is one of the most recent that I've made. My father, to my benefit, he moved in Costa Rica to a region that is very touristic. So I've been enjoying to visit him more because of that. And I've continued to collect vignettes of the environment when I'm there. And that's actually the place where I have been the most productive in terms of making. Every time I go, I create a ridiculous amount of drawings and little things that happen while I'm there. And that shows me that it's really a very enjoyable space. So basically, my takeaway, I would hope to be for anyone who is trying to identify ways in which we can take our profession and use it in some way as medicine, for our already complicated immigrant context. One of them is obviously design without fear. Or make art without fear. That applies, I think, to both of them. Write without fear, tell your own story without fear. I think that in our search to being less invisible and gaining a stronger, louder voice is to be able to share, even if that's uncomfortable, for ourselves or for others, but is the reality of us, and other people needs to know. I promise never to separate myself from my work. And another thing is acknowledging that every person that lives in this earth is a source of unique knowledge, experiences, and that can be reproduced or unearthed, brought back to the surface through these kinds of expression, these kinds of artistic and design-related messages that we can create, that we already know how to create. We do that all the time, right? We do that whenever we think things are wrong, whenever we think we need to intervene. And we just need to remember that, even if we're in a space where we cannot really find people who have gone through similar situations, it's a very human thing to to tell, to shout, to try to have a voice, right? And we have been telling stories everywhere. So this is a beautiful mural in Los Angeles. And I think that is really wonderful when we start to see places where we're really not from, that start to take a more amorphous shape because of the people that live there, because of the people who are able to find their space and to find their voice and own it, right? I think that, as I said before, it's very painful to imagine how we continue to allow many people to live in the shadows. But once we are able to see the sun and put ourselves out there, it's one of the most liberating and healing things. And it's happening since the beginning of times. Finally, I want to share a piece of work from a former MFA student from the University of Florida, actually. And I care about this project so much, and to this day I continue showing it because it's a very beautiful way in which we tell stories in not only in a multi-technical mixed media sort of way, but it embraces technology, it embraces iconography and narrative. This is a memory by Marjorie Shropshire, and she tells a story here of her memories of living in a boat in Miami when she was little, and how mesmerized she was always about the shapes that light would create through the water. So through that kind of experimentation, looking micro, and being able to identify the elements that make up a visual language, we're able to create things that are extremely unique and very powerful. So I think that's it. Thank you so much. I don't even know how long it took. There you go. Good time.
That was superb, Gabby, and
Thank you.
very, very inspiring. Really, I mean, you took us to a journey of, like, it brought back memories for many of us. And also we could talk about several similarities. When you said that you're Costa Rican, and then you also mentioned, like, alone in academia, not many people, but then you found your people, right? And then slowly started progressing and finding your own voice, your own truth. And so many similarities I can see with myself as well, and many of us as women designers, like, we're all finding our own space. So thank you for sharing your vulnerable moments as an immigrant woman, daughter, and designing without fear, right? That's so important for all of us women and immigrants, actually. Finding your voice and owning it. In so many ways, we all connect and we all hear you. So I would love to open this up to everyone. Whoever has questions, please feel free to ask. And oh boy, Gabby, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody wants to ask a question, please unmute and feel free to chat.
I don't know if it's a question so much, but I'll start and just sort of mention. So Gaby, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. You mentioned something maybe toward the beginning half about the immigrant experience and how it does impact the second generations. And, we have these multi-generations that are impacted by that experience, and how it allows those experiences and that impact allows us to identify with the, I'll just say, trials or pain or feelings of those who are othered, sort of othered in society, maybe here in America specifically. And I really identified with that. I think that that's really, really true. No matter what the background is of someone that I meet or as an instructor, someone that I teach, I find that I tend to identify with or am able to speak in a different on a different wavelength, maybe, with people who also see themselves othered in some way. Doesn't matter what kind of way, but it's however that is, there's just some sort of experience that we bring to those moments. And I thought that was a really, really important note that you made there.
Thanks.
Gaby, thank you so much for sharing. And, you know, there were so many things I related to. You know, I think, I mean, I feel like both of us share like a work in terms of like thinking about the matriarch and the lineage of matriarch
Mhm.
in our work. You know, I would love honestly advice, because like I think my work is so rooted in matriarch, but at the same time it's sort of very opposite, you know, in terms of like the relationship that I have with the matriarch is kind of contentious, and the relationship of shame that my culture sort of like brings in many ways. So the way I root it is I try to like keep the matriarch in context and understand their struggles, and as best to my ability as I can, because like I am the rebel of the family, and there's always like that kind of a balancing act. I wonder, you know, in that space, how do we feel joy or pride and shame at the same time? And how do you like think about balancing that in one's work?
I think that will always show up, not necessarily with matriarchy, but patriarchy in my case, because I go back home and it's my dad and two brothers, and they're still very patriarchal in that sense. There is a sense of conflict, multi-level conflict with those things. And I think that one aspect that I want to make sure that we all embrace as well is we don't have to be in good terms with everything, right? Back home. But as you describe it, and I think it's very well said, we just need to be able to understand the context, why this is happening, why it continues to happen, and what we're doing about it if this is something that we believe is not helping us grow, right? Myself as a woman or other people in my family. So what I try to do is just be aware and very intentional with helping people who come from a similar background that may not be able to take the steps that maybe others have taken, but they still want to. So one thing that I've been focusing on a lot is in how to help immigrant academics, and how to help them understand that you don't have to have $1 million to move to another country to study and have a career. I arrived to the United States with $400 in my pocket the first time in 2007. And, you know, and that was because I was working before coming here. So, and there are ways, and I think that we have done a really bad job at finding the best methods to communicate that to other people who may be looking for something like that, right? And also, it's not that we all desire the same thing. So I think that just being able to identify how much of my experience can help, and how much of my own soul searching, and in my case making, helps me understand the context of things, right? I have made peace with the fact that, you know, my father, he also suffers from multi-generational trauma, and the reason that he is the way he is because of that, and a lot of other stuff, right? But I still love him deeply, and we have found spaces in which we can talk and we have been able to heal in some other ways together. So I think that, and this is why vulnerability is so important in my work, because that also includes being able to say, this is my reality, this is your reality, and I respect it. But I want you to hear me and hear what I have to say about that. And maybe, we can find a common space. With family, we can be a little bit more tolerant. maybe not so much with, people who are not that close to us or know us in the same way, or are impactful, but regardless, we are alone in this world, and the only point of contact that is really ours is family. So I think that if we're able to make peace with the things that maybe impact us, but we're able to understand and contextualize, that's already a very healthy way to come back. And I'm saying all of this based on my own experience, right? I have no idea how each one of us or anyone digests their own stories or past, but that's what I have found to be useful for me. I don't want to be dying alone, meaning without a family connection. And I think that there is a lot of forgiving and forgetting to be done when necessary, because love doesn't have to look the same way. And that's also another thing that it's important to understand. Whether we share it or not, that's another story, but understanding helps.
You sound like a sage.
Oh my God. Thank you, Garima. You were the one who introduced me to Rumi.
I still have a copy of his book, actually.
Yeah.
Gaby, first of
Hi.
all, thank you so much for your fantastic lecture. I mean,
Thank you.
it was very emotional. I could resonate with most of your stories. I felt that all of us that who immigrate in some way, we have very common thoughts and common works. And always, as a person who came from Iran, Middle East, and I see my works with other Iranian designers or artists, and I see that all of us, we are working the same things. And when I was in University of Florida for my second master, I was talking with my advisor, and I said, I don't want to talk or work anything about culture from Iranian culture. I want to do something new, and I'm done. I'm tired of working on about something cultural related. And he didn't let me. And he said that, no, you have to do that. This is part of your background. This is part of part of your identity. And I always think that as a person who are not Western or who are not from here, is it really privilege that we have this resource, or we can use our background? Or if I didn't have, what did I do? How was my design work? How was my artwork? So that's always thinking about that. I'd like to hear your voice.
Thanks
I
for
think
that.
it's the same reason why many people of color are sent out to diversity committees. Or the same reason why, right, yes, Mina, exactly. Or the same reason why, we're consulted in those things that in appearance we are supposed to be interested in, right? I decide to do this work. You can decide not to ever do that work, right? Just because you're Iranian and an immigrant doesn't mean that your work has to be about that. And I think that's important to be able to own our story and own the decisions that we make as immigrants, because yes, it's very valuable and you can bring a lot of new information to people and educate them, but it's not your obligation, right? You're a person, an individual with interests, and you may not even want to go back to that, and that's a perfectly good thing to do. So I think that that's something that people in academia need to understand, right? And how easy it is to tokenize people. And we need to say things straight up, right? Like, sorry, I'm not interested. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
You know, I appreciate that you see me as someone who can bring this knowledge, but this is my jam. This is what I like to do, and I want to research on that. So, you know, it's very different how people see us and how we see ourselves clearly. And owning our own story is so important, right? We cannot, and I say it because a lot of my journey through life has been about meeting expectations and following rules and following, you know, like, oh, so and so wants you to do this, so thinks that you could do this, you know, including my family. So that we need to shake off that and be able to say, hey, listen, I may look like this, I may be, you know, I may be a person who can, yes, bring all of this knowledge, but I don't have to educate anybody, and I have the right to do my thing. So that's all I have to say. I don't know if it helps.
No,
but
I mean, I truly enjoy working from my background and my,
yeah,
especially from the ancient time. I mean, I think
Yeah.
this is really valuable, as you said, but
yeah.
because I see that very common thread to all
Oh yeah,
people
all the
who
time.
are immigrant from India, Latin countries, Middle Eastern
Yeah.
countries. We have all this.
And I think the big question is, do you enjoy it?
Mhm.
Right? Because we also need to be able to find happiness in that. And I think that it's a huge privilege to do work that help us succeed in our profession that we also enjoy to do. And we have that right, you know, and we need to find that space. That brings a whole lot of other conversations about many things in academia that maybe we can talk about for another time. But we need to prioritize our happiness as much as we can.
Thank you so much.
I think prioritizing happiness in academia, that's a whole segment in itself,
Oh,
right? As women, and then if you add another
oh
layer
yeah.
of immigrant women and whatnot, and or second generation and whatnot. And it's not like the white community has their own struggles. They have as well. So, but then
Oh yeah. That's yeah.
yeah, right. I mean, but Sitare, just listening to what your advisor told you, maybe in a way that what they were trying to say is like, find your own identity, talk about your own culture, but then tokenizing our identity, like in a way to kind of share stories and educate others is such a huge burden, right? It's such a huge burden. But then, but if you enjoy doing it, then that's great. But if you don't, I think we all have the freedom to do what we want to do, right?
Yeah.
Or what we want to teach. But thanks for being so open and transparent, everyone.
Yeah, I super appreciate that question, Sitare, because I think
Yeah.
personally I struggle with that because I feel like it's never really about the identity because everybody has an identity. It's just that the white identity is not seen as an identity because it's the, you know, it's the basis. So I think that's one thing that I personally think about and wonder, you know, like that was a similar experience in my grad school and over years, you know, it's like if a work looks a certain way, it's just like I often think about like when does representation becomes a trap, and when do we own start to weaponize our own tokenization. I feel like that's just like constantly something that I would love if more things were written about that, to be honest, to like really think about when do we actually in the search of finding our agency start to like play into the our own weaponization, you know. So thank you so much for bringing that question. I super appreciated that. And And I don't know how to find happiness within academia, and I'm still figuring it out.
Also, the big thing is finding happiness in academia, regardless of any culture.
Yeah.
I had a similar situation and experience today, and I just want to thank you as well for bringing that up. And I couldn't agree more. I'm sitting here emphatically like nodding my head in agreement with the comments about tokenization and how we might do that to ourselves. I would love to write about that. I have so many thoughts.
Let's
Nina. Yeah, okay.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's
Even,
do it.
in addition to that, there is the there is an additional side of this where like and this you know this goes across any cultural experience, but like where we also deny who we are for fear of what comes next. And that can look like a lot of different things, but you know, I think that is also part of that conversation of where you leverage it, whether aware of it or not, and when you deny it, and why we do that. So this is a fertile ground for conversation for sure.
Yeah.
I agree, Mina. I think that we need to, and the thing is, one thing that I have found to be very interesting that helps with tokenism as it happens here is that conversations about race, ethnicity, and culture, at least in my country, are very different from the conversations that happen here. And there is so much of learning that takes for someone coming from another country to catch up and being able to make sense of the context and how we fit in there, right? And like, what is tokenism? What are you talking about? How, you know, like all of these questions that really they're not very easy to get a reasonable response to that. And you have to go through the whole thing to get to some level of understanding, right? And I wish I have been able to talk about these things better and in a more informed way when I first came here, because I know I would be in a completely different mindset, and I will probably be much happier, you know, that I am right now. But there is a learning curve that is so steep from, you know, from the historic perspective, the cultural perspective, and even how we say things and how we express things in our own cultures and languages, right? That we make so many mistakes, and I made so many mistakes, and I got into that trap of tokenism so much without knowing it, that it's so unfair, right? And so whether we have to write about it, yes, we do. Thank you, that's it.
Yeah, tokenism in academia. So we are the diversity, right? So yeah, I mean, maybe I'll send an email to you, all of you folks, and be like, do you want to collaborate? Do you want to write something?
Can you title the subject the diversity committee?
The diversity.
Kidding. Bad joke.
No,
Oh,
that's
man.
one of the reasons it sucks. Thank you so much, Gabby. This was so wonderful.
Yeah.
So lovely to see you.
It's been a pleasure. And again, thank you for doing this, for opening up the opportunity to talk about this. We women in particular, we need each other. And that is already a very important thing to make space for that. So, and it's lovely to see all of you.
Yes.
Thank
Very
you.
nice to see you. Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful weekend, you all.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you,
you too.
everyone. You all take care.
Bye.
Have a
Yep.
great semester and stay in touch. Our next event is going to be Chaat Masala, and that's going to be in March. Look out for that. We have a designer joining us from Sri Lanka. He's a typographer, and so do join us. And you all have a great semester and take care, stay safe and stay warm. Right? And
Very, very cold.
and bye everybody.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Archana, you have a minute.
I'm trying to look for the record button to stop recording.
Yeah.
There you go.